get to the main event. You know, during the last campaign, there was a lot going on in Colorado, and there wasn't a lot of time to notice what was going on outside. But I must admit that in trying to keep track of what was going on outside of Colorado, it was interesting to watch what was happening in New Mexico, where a term-limited governor who was immersed in charges of scandal and questionable practices was being replaced. And as I watched a 5-way Republican primary, out of that primary emerged the district attorney of Doña Ana County, New Mexico, Susana Martinez. It probably should have come as no surprise that she would emerge from that 5-way primary. This is a woman who knows how to fight. Her father was a Golden Glove boxer. It was probably in her DNA. Her parents ran a small business security guard agency that she worked in by day, studied at night, before she went on to school. And her whole story is one of the American dream, and of a parent who made sure she did what was necessary to pursue the dreams they found. When she got out of law school from the University of Oklahoma, she went to work for the district attorney's office, and she specialized in the prosecution of crimes against children. And after serving in that capacity with great acclaim, she decided to take on the sitting district attorney. And she was going to do it as a Democrat until she and her husband met with some friends who were Republicans, and after discussing what the Republican Party was all about and the issues, she decided she was a Republican. Switched parties. And unseated the sitting district attorney in an election nobody gave her much chance of winning. That was the precursor to her challenging for the Republican nomination and becoming the first Latina to be elected governor in the United States of America. Governor Martinez, there was no better person tonight. When we started thinking about this dinner and who we should have here tonight, the message that I want everybody to leave this dinner with tonight is the future of our party and what we have to do to win. And you bring that message tonight. And I want to leave you with this quote from her State of the State address. My favorite one of the State of the State address I think is really great. At a time when New Mexicans are struggling to make ends meet, their governor should not be leading a life of privilege. That's why I cut costs at the governor's residence by 55%, permanently eliminating the positions of 2 personal chefs. The first gentleman will just have to help out with the cooking.
Thank you so much, Chairman Watts, for your hard work, working hard for Republicans, good elected officials to pull together and work hard for our state. And thank you to all the elected officials that are here and party leadership. It's exciting to see folks come together in order to make sure that your state is better and to make sure that good decisions are made every day. And I want to thank Claude. I don't know, where is Claude? So, right there. Lord, thank you for being so gracious. I spilled wine on her in the reception, and you were so gracious about that. Thank you very much. And it was red wine. I first want to tell you a little bit about who I am. I grew up in El Paso, Texas. I was born in 1959. My parents lived in the Second Ward, there in the lower valley of El Paso. And I have a brother and a sister. My sister is special needs, and my brother owns a business there in El Paso. So growing up, my parents were Democrats. They're very conservative. My parents both had to work. 2 weeks after having children, my mother went back to school. It's just the way it was. My parents scraped in order to send my brother and I to Catholic school. And eventually we went on to public school. My dad was a deputy sheriff and my mother worked in the office of various businesses. And she was also in the county doing books for Farrah Manufacturing. It was an ordinary family. We struggled. We lived paycheck to paycheck. I remember we used to go to Catholic school and we had to take our lunch bags because there was no cafeteria there at the school. And we would buy groceries every 2 weeks. And my mother had to make sure that those groceries lasted 2 weeks for lunch, for us to take our lunch to school. And there was a freezer in our garage. It had a key. And everything that could fit in that freezer would go into the freezer, from potato chips to bread to milk. Everything and anything that could fit in that freezer went in that freezer so that it lasted the 2 weeks. We literally lived paycheck to paycheck. And so as I grew up, I was a freshman in high school, and I remember having a class that the teachers had where they sat us down and they had a group of girls come in and we were going to talk about what we wanted to do in life. Where did we want to go? And no one had really had that kind of conversation with us. We hadn't thought beyond high school, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, where do you want to be in life? And I remember wanting to be involved in public service. I used to watch the senators and the representatives on television, and I used to think, oh, they're lawyers. A lot of them are lawyers. I guess you have to be a lawyer to be a senator or representative in Congress. And so I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to get into public service, but I just never thought I could be someone involved in national politics. And so I told the teacher, I said, I want to be, I think, a mayor of the city. And she said, why are you stopping there? And I said, why am I stopping where? She said, why just that? Why not go beyond that? Why not dream bigger than that? And I said, because I don't have any examples. I don't have any place to look. Someone else's path to follow. And that's when I learned from those two teachers to dream big. Because then your entire life, you're fighting to achieve that dream. And whether you get there or not, the fight will continue. You will continue to achieve, you'll continue to fight to become that. And that's how I became governor. And I'm not done fighting. I went to law school at the University of Oklahoma, and during an internship, I was at a hearing in El Paso. And at that hearing, I watched a lady testify on behalf of 2 children. The children were 3 and 4 years old. They had watched their father murder their pregnant mother and roll her into a carpet and put her in the trunk of the car, load the 2 children in the car seat, and drive to the river and dump her in the river. And it was amazing to watch the prosecutor and the social worker fight for those 2 little girls. And that was the day that I decided that I was going to, 1, become a prosecutor, and 2, that I was going to focus my life, my commitment to children. I graduated from law school, and I went on to make Las Cruces, New Mexico my home. That was 25 years ago. I became a prosecutor, and immediately had children in my office that I knew nothing about, did not know how to speak to them about the issue of sexual abuse and physical abuse. And I immediately learned, going to law school didn't teach me a thing about the real world. So I went on and trained extensively so that I could do right by those kids. And I specialized and trained nationally on the physical and sexual abuse of children, including child homicide. And I continue to dedicate my life to those children. But one day, there was a new DA in our county. And he and I didn't see eye to eye because I supported his opponent. He got elected, and the day that I received a subpoena to testify against him in a personnel hearing and swore to testify truthfully, he fired me. So I promptly left the office, started to pull together my resources, ran against him, and beat him. You know, at events like this, I'm often asked, how do we do a better job of reaching out to Hispanic Democrats? Well, I know a little something about attracting Hispanic Democrats, because I used to be one. When I decided to run against the DA that I eventually defeated, I was going to run against him as a Democrat. My parents were registered Democrats, I was a registered Democrat, and no one asked anything of me. I didn't ask anything of them. I simply registered as my parents had registered, and that was it. But one day, in Las Cruces, 2 Republicans called and asked my husband and I to go to lunch. And I knew they were Republicans. So I told my husband, I said, we're going to be really polite. We're going to go and visit. We're going to thank him for 3 meals. And that'll be the end of that. Because there's no way in Joint County, where Republicans are outnumbered 3-1, I would ever run for office other than by being a Democrat. That would be impossible to win. So we showed up and we visited with these 2 men. And they're responsible for making me a Republican. And what happened was we sat down with them and we started to talk about issues. They never said the word Republican or Democrat. They never used the words conservative or liberal. We talked about issues that were important to us. How did we feel about the size of government and how big it should be or shouldn't be in our lives? The taxes. My parents developed a small business. I was in high school. I thought they were crazy. We had no money. There were a few $100s in a savings account, and they decided to create a business together. Texas Security Guard Service. So I understood what it was like to struggle, to pay enormous taxes, and how you needed more of your own money in your own bank account to go after another contract, to hire those individuals, to go after another job, create more jobs for people in your town. I understood what that meant. And so we had that conversation with these 2 individuals. I knew what it meant to keep more of your own money. We talked about welfare as a way of life versus a hand up. And so we went through various issues, but they never asked anything of us. Keep in mind, they never said the word Republican, they never said the word Democrat. Not a single word about being conservative or liberal. We walked away, my husband and I got in the car, and we said, well, we're Republicans. That could have been the beginning of the end of my career as an elected official. I may never, ever have achieved that. Because keep in mind, we were outnumbered 3-1. In Joint County, Republicans, they just didn't get elected in our county. We switched parties about a month later, and about 20 months later, I was elected as the district attorney with 60% of the vote. Better job of reaching out to Hispanic Democrats. Because you may not get them to switch parties. You may not get them to completely vote for all Republicans. What you do is you talk to them about the issues that are important to them, as they are to most American families. And you ask them to consider the candidate, not the party. And that's how they start to vote and cross party lines for the best candidate, so that at the end of the day, we all win. And eventually, many of these Democrat supporters of ours ended up registering as Republicans. I have won now, before I became governor, I won 4 terms as district attorney. The last time, I did not have an opponent. I ran for office 16 months. It is a difficult task. New Mexico is a very big state. I was well known in my county. but we have a different television station that covers our news down south compared to the rest of the state. I had 3% name ID state. So I was up for the challenge and the fight, because I was not going to allow for us to have 4 more years of the 8 that we had previously had under the Richardson-Dennis administration. I'm proud of the fact that I am the first Hispanic governor in the United States. But I'm also very mindful of the enormous responsibility. Because if I don't do this right, then I will not pave the path for other little girls to follow. I have to do it right. You cannot just be known for being the first Hispanic woman to be governor. You have to be known for what you do right. And you just happen to be Hispanic. And just happen to be. But the way I've won my elections is by having an honest and sincere conversation with those folks who vote, and making sure that I connected with them. We had conversations, whether it be the beauty shop, whether it was the grocery store line. It didn't matter where I was, at the repair shop, anywhere and everywhere I could find someone, I talked to them about what I stood for. 1 as a prosecutor when I was running for DA, and 2 as governor. What I wanted to do for our state. We went to places in the state of New Mexico where Republicans never go. Why? 70% of the vote is Democrat. But you have to go on with the conversations and leave those words out, Republican and Democrat. Leave those words out, conservative and liberal. And talk about the facts and what's important to them. You know, when I first won for office, I was governor. The legislature started about 18 days later. And I remember one of the Republican senators came up to me and he says, well, it's time to govern. And I said, yes, it is. It's time to govern. And later I realized what he really meant. And what he said was, it's time to govern. But we needed to remember that we weren't campaigning anymore. That we needed to go back to doing the status quo. And forget what we had promised we were going to do. And I refused. They meant it's time to forget all the promises I made to voters, forget about doing what the people want, and just keep doing what they've always been doing. Because, really, that's the easiest thing to do. I promised not to raise taxes over and over again throughout my campaign and once I took office. And I had, in that situation, I had a Republican senator come to me and say, it's time to govern and we need to raise taxes in order to balance the budget. And I said, no, I will never forget. Republicans won many elections across the country by making commitments to voters on all sorts of issues. And the quickest way for us to give back everything we've won is to break those commitments. And keeping those commitments first come with making sure that our financial house is in order. And I just put together a budget with bipartisan support, a balanced budget for the state of New Mexico. And how we go about this very important issue of balancing our budget, it is important because it is a blueprint and it's a statement about our values. My approach was very simple. New Mexico families and small businesses are not overtaxed. State government is overspent. The voters are skeptical, and maybe rightfully so, of politicians from all parties who say they're going to cut spending. And that's why it's important that we lead by example. As soon as I went to the residence, I went in and I asked for the payroll. I asked, let me see what the budget looks like. There were 2 chefs. And I immediately dismissed those 2 positions. I cut all spending by 55%. And my husband makes a mean bologna sandwich. And we're also going to get rid of the state luxury jet. I flew to your beautiful state on Southwest Airlines. I also cut every agency that I am responsible for. There are 22 cabinet positions, and we cut them by 10% across the board. They have to. However, when you cut, you also have to make sure that you're protecting those core programs, the core responsibilities of state government, which is education and health care for the most in need. And I was determined to do the cutting that is necessary without impacting the spending in the classroom. And we have done it. So what we have to do is find savings elsewhere. And we have a film industry in New Mexico, which we're very proud of. However, 25% subsidy is what exists in the state of New Mexico. So for every $100, taxpayers pay $25 to Hollywood. And I was not willing to balance the budget on the backs of our children to allow Hollywood to have a 25% subsidy. It's really very simple. 25 cents given back to you for every dollar. And it was being abused. At one point, there was a jet that was actually leased by the film company in New Mexico, and the jet came from California. It cost $100,000 to lease it. Taxpayers of the state of New Mexico paid $25,000 to lease that jet. How much money was made in the state of New Mexico? $200, because the individual who set up the lease at a travel agency paid $200. So we didn't make any money. It wasn't creating jobs. That one transaction cost taxpayers $25,000. So what we did is we put a cap. Just last year, we spent $65 million was given to Hollywood. So we put a cap so that we could save $25 million to prevent any cuts to the classroom, so that we are making sure our kids are doing better in school. We still want the film industry to be in New Mexico, and we will continue to have the film industry in New Mexico. But they hired lobbyists, and they came upon that legislature like nobody did, to convince them that Hollywood needed the taxpayers' money. And we fought, and we won. Going back to the budget, which is really a statement about our values as we govern. I could not support cutting the classroom spending. I just couldn't do it. And so we wanted to continue to trim wherever else we could, and we have. I mean, from down to vehicles and cell phones and vacancies. If the positions are vacant, you have to justify that they're going to be filled and why they're going to be filled. We are going to cut anywhere and everywhere as long as, and I'll tell you why, because the previous administration grew state government by 54%. When inflation and the population growth in the state of New Mexico only grew by 23%. So obviously there was excess. Obviously we can meet the needs of the people of New Mexico, even though we're cutting back on the size of our government, and that's what we're determined to do. And so what we want to do is to make sure that we're not raising taxes. I'm not signing a single bill that raises taxes. So not everyone in the legislature agrees. They've tried. They want to raise taxes. They want to tax the job creators. They even want to tax the internet.
But we continue to say the same thing. Why? Because for 16 months I said it. And I have to mean it. We're not going to balance the budget by raising taxes. But we can by cutting back on the excess. And we've looked for it everywhere, and we're going to continue to do it. I've been in office now almost 3 months. And we now have a balanced budget, and we didn't do it with raising taxes. You know, my opponent always said, my opponent was the lieutenant governor for 8 years. And so it was known as the Richardson-Dennis administration for 8 years, and 16 months in my campaign as well. And what we have to do in order to get, of course, the jobs back in New Mexico is extremely important. But she always talked about how state government creates jobs. And she even in one debate, or one presentation that we had, I remember a student from high school or college there said, Candidate Dennis, what do you plan on doing for us as college students to create jobs? I mean, where do we go when we graduate? There aren't any jobs out there. She said, not being a state employee. And everybody was stunned. But they had grown by 54%. And she said, state government creates jobs, and I don't believe that. My mother and father struggled to create a business that ended up employing 125 people in 3 states. And they started with $400. All the state can do is create an environment that is a positive environment in order for those jobs to be in our state, to be competitive with Texas and Colorado. And finally, during the campaign trail, I told my opponent, I said, you know what, you're absolutely right. You do create jobs. The last 8 years, you created a ton of jobs. They're over in Texas, they're over in Colorado, they're over in Arizona, they're not in. And she did. Because the regulatory, burdensome regulations that existed in our states were enormous. And many of our jobs went to Texas. And Governor Perry would often speak, when he was running for governor in Texas, he would speak about that girl, that woman over there in New Mexico. And he was always trying to advocate for them to support me. And I told Governor Perry, I'm going to come back for my job. As soon as I get elected, I'm going to come back and take the jobs you've taken. And I'll take a few of your own. And so what we did, a bill is on my desk to be signed. Union Pacific is going to come to New Mexico from Texas and create 3,000 jobs in our state. And the reason is we became competitive with Texas in reference to not taxing locomotive fuel. And now they're coming to our side of the state where we're going to have an economic boom in the southern part of our state like we've never seen in New Mexico. But that's how you do it. We become competitive, and Governor Perry welcomes that competition. Let's fight for the best jobs. Let's fight for our kids to stay in our communities. Let's fight for the best education. And we have to make sure our education is better. New Mexico is 49th in the nation in education. 80% of our 4th graders do not read proficiently. But we have thrown a ton of money at the system and gotten nothing for it. And so people are afraid to measure progress and achievement. I am determined to make sure that our teachers get paid what they deserve, and our excellent teachers separate those from those that aren't performing well. We had a bill to not allow social promotion to take place anymore, not allow that child to go from the 3rd grade to the 4th grade if they didn't have the basic skills. We're passing them along, obviously, if 4th graders, 80% of our 4th graders can't read proficiently. And if you can't read in the 4th grade, you can't learn. Because starting the 4th grade, you are reading in order to learn. And so what we have to do is change the culture of low expectations, because what we're doing is telling our children, it's okay if you don't do so great. We'll just keep moving you along. And eventually our kids drop out. We have a nearly 40% dropout rate in Mexico. Education for our children is going to be #1 every day of the next 4 years as governor of the state of New Mexico. As I have fought for 25 years as a prosecutor for those kids, I will fight for those kids to make sure that they learn, they graduate, and they have good jobs. We can no longer accept failure. It's morally wrong to tell our children that they cannot achieve, and I won't. Talk about attracting Hispanic voters without someone bringing up immigration or border security. And many will argue that Republicans must be soft on border security in order to win Hispanic votes. I strongly disagree. The Obama administration just today said that the Mexican drug violence is not spilling into the United States. Secretary Napolitano was in El Paso today, which is right on the New Mexico-Mexico border. The article that was written said, the perception of Mexican drug cartel violence spilling into the United States border towns is flat out inaccurate. Well, I spent 25 years prosecuting cases on the border, and I can tell you that the Obama administration is wrong to minimize this issue. I hope that Secretary Napolitano will go down the road to Columbus, New Mexico, where most of the leadership of that town was arrested just last week for trafficking in guns, including AK-47s, and trafficking them to the Mexican cartel. They arrested the chief of police, the mayor, several trustees, and 11 other individuals, leaders in the community, for buying many, many guns and sending them to Mexico for the cartel. And so it's stunning to me to see the disconnect between Washington and the issues that we face in the South. It is stunning that today she will be there, Secretary, to say, we're not being impacted by the violence in Mexico. And so I am targeting my focus as governor on illegal immigrants that come to New Mexico to commit criminal acts. We have to make sure that we're not making New Mexico attractive. And in New Mexico, currently, we issue driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. We are one of 2 states in the country that do this. Washington is the other state. We fought hard to repeal that law. Because what's happening is we have actually created an industry where people traffic and bring humans to New Mexico from all over the country, paying a price of anywhere from $1,000 to $6,000 with fake documents to get a driver's license, and then leave our state. And now they have a valid ID that they can travel the country with. And we are fighting to repeal that law. And we are. Now, there's a difference between illegal immigration and legal immigration. And we strongly support legal immigration. That is what our country is built on. But Hispanics, just like Americans, all over the country, we understand the difference between ending sanctuary policies and politics for criminals and the broader issue of immigration. There's a difference. And we do not want to make New Mexico an attractive place for illegal immigrants to then travel the country freely and commit crimes. That individual is the one we are focused on. I signed an executive order just minutes after being sworn in at midnight on January 1st. And that executive order ended the policy of sanctuary in New Mexico. One thing I found quite amusing is when I pushed my border security initiatives, some liberals in the legislature tried to say I was pushing the national Republican agenda that was anti-immigrant. Around the same time, this very same senator was talking about the National Republican Anti-Immigrant Agenda. He was voting to confirm my pick as Cabinet Secretary for the Department of Corrections. She was a Hispanic, Democrat, immigrant from Juarez, Mexico, who is now a naturalized citizen. And I'm proud to say is the first Hispanic woman Cabinet Secretary of the Department of Corrections for the state of New Mexico. So, to build our party is not about token gestures or hollow stunts. It's not about having just the rhetoric. We have to get rid of the rhetoric. We have to dig deep and talk about issues in a meaningful way to convince people to vote for Republican. You may not ever get them to change their party, but you can get them to vote for Republican. As a Hispanic, raised in a conservative family, a Catholic family, I was a Republican, but nobody bothered to have the conversation with me. And when I was on the campaign trail, I did the very same thing that those two men did when they had lunch with my husband and I. We traveled everywhere, even places where Republicans would never go. They would write off certain counties in the state of New Mexico, thinking they could never win. We were up in Guadalupe County in New Mexico. We were there. We were at the plaza. There were 300 people there. I didn't really understand if they were there to support us or to boo us or what exactly was going to happen. But I said the same message no matter where I was. I didn't change the message because I happened to be in northern New Mexico, which would have been different if I'd been in southern New Mexico. The message has to be the same, otherwise you're just a politician. And so when I talked about border security, and I talked about repealing the law on driver's licenses, and I talked about securing our state, I didn't know if I was going to be stoned or what, but I said it. And there were probably 90% Hispanics there. And they all applauded. And they stood up because they understood the value of the message. But there were probably 90% of them Democrats. That county alone, some of the Republicans received about 25 to 30% of the vote. I received 59% of the vote. We can't be afraid to take our message everywhere. We just can't. We have to take it everywhere and have that sincere conversation. Because at the end of the day, we're going to be the ones with the message, the right message, regardless of what party we belong to. We're going to be the ones to make the difference. But you have to, as elected officials, and those of you that ran and weren't elected, you have to try again. It is important. It is difficult. It is difficult to run for office. It is a tough thing. Your family suffers. It's very challenging. But once it's over, you look back and you think, if I'd known what I know now, maybe I wouldn't have done it. But I am so glad to have done it and to have accomplished it. Keep in mind, I had a 3% name ID when I started. It was an uphill, and there were a total of 5 opponents, a total of 5 running for governor in the primary. And $2 million in my opponent's bank account after the primary was over. I had 0. I had spent it all in the primary. And so people make a difference when you pull together like events like today, to make sure you get behind the right candidate, to make sure that the message gets out. But when you speak about what you want to do, if you don't follow through, then it's not going to matter who you were and how you got elected. Because at the end of the day, we have to deliver real results. And we have to keep our word.